farming, fishing, foraging, mining, combat. These are the 5 skills that live in harmony in the valley. Only the farmer, master of all 5 skills, can bring economic prosperity to Pelican Town. Daring quests into endless dungeons, slaying dragons with enchanted swords from space, we can only be talking about one game, Stardew Valley. Welcome to the final guide in the series where we go over all of the skills. In the previous guide for mining, I mentioned that even though they seem similar, there's plenty of things to talk about that are specific to only combat. And that is true. Today we'll be going over combat mechanics, all of the different weapons and where to get them, rings, and finally, the rewards you get for leveling up. So combat. It follows the rules of most video games. Hit bad guy, make their HP go to 0, and don't let your own HP go to 0. If you do, you'll be treated to a rougher penalty than if you were to pass out from running out of energy or staying up too late. That penalty is 10% of your gold up to 1,000 and moving on to the next day. The penalty for running out of HP is 5% of your gold, but it's up to 5,000. In addition to losing some of the items in your inventory, you can lose absolutely anything that isn't a tool. Yes, including all of your weapons. Yes, including all of that cheese you stockpiled, even including the infinity weapons, which take hours of work to make. Well, until version 1.6, infinity weapons will be safe then. To get any of these lost items back, you'll have to unlock the Adventurers Guild by killing 10 slimes starting from the day after you enter the mines. Go and see Marlin at the front desk, and you'll have the option to use the item recovery service to get 1 item back. Choose wisely though, because you'll have to pay a fee equal to the amount of money that you'd get if you sold that stack of items. So usually the best things to recover are food, weapons, or bombs. Things that you use, not sell. Once you pay, you'll get that item in the mail the next day, but all of the other items will be permanently lost. Speaking of the Adventurers Guild, this is your one-stop shop for anything combat related. Marlin tends to the shop where you can buy all kinds of weapons, boots, or rings. As you get deeper in the mines, the shop will be updated with stronger items. An important thing to know, nothing here will ever be the best possible item you can get, whether it's weapons or boots or even rings. But oftentimes it's better than what you're guaranteed to get elsewhere. Also, this is the only place that you can sell any weapons, boots, or rings. You're not even allowed to ship them otherwise. Over on the right, you have Gil tending to the Slayer rewards. Once you unlock the Adventurers Guild, the game will start tracking how many of each enemy type you've defeated. And once you reach a certain threshold, you can get a reward. Every reward is unique and can only be obtained from the Slayer task. And if you ever lose any of them, you can buy it again from the store. Many of the quests aren't restricted to a single specific enemy, and the rewards range from weapons, rings, and hats. That is to say, some of the rewards are great, like the burglar ring, but others are nearly useless. You do need to complete all of them if you want to achieve perfection though. Next, let's talk about stats. Each weapon has specific stats that differentiate it from other weapons. These stats are damage, which is pretty self-explanatory, crit power, which determines how much more damage a critical hit will do. The formula is base damage times 3 plus crit power divided by 50. Simple. So say your weapon, like most, has no crit power modifier, the critical hit will just do 3 times the damage. If you have, for instance, the lava katana with a crit power of 25, critical hits will deal 3.5 times damage. How do you get a critical hit? Well, that's determined by your crit chance stat. It's a bit more complicated than damage. Most weapons have a base crit rate around 2%, daggers usually have a little bit extra on top of that, and each point of additional crit chance amounts to a little less than a 2% increase. This chance can also be increased through foraging, gear, and luck buffs, all of which we'll go over later. Next we have defense. Pretty simple. Each point of defense reduces the amount of damage you would take by 1 point. Immunity lowers your chance of getting inflicted by a debuff by 10% for each point. If the immunity buff is higher than the chance of the debuff, you're effectively immune to that debuff. The weight of the weapon affects how far the enemy will get knocked back when hit, and weapon speed, not to be confused with movement speed, is how long swinging the weapon will take. Clubs by default will have a slower swing speed than swords. For reference, for a sword to be as slow as a club, it would need a -8 speed stat. Each point of speed makes a 40 millisecond difference. Also, while movement speed and weapon speed are two different things, any movement speed buffs you get from coffee or something will also be applied to your weapon speed. There's several ways to raise these stats outside of what weapon you're holding, through means like rings or food buffs. Or if you're in the late game, you can go to the forge. Normally, the forge can enchant tools to give them a special effect, but for weapons, you'll be able to forge them 3 times, and you can increase the stat of your choice by using a specific gem on your forge. The weird thing is, each of these forge upgrades don't necessarily equate to 1 point in the stat. For instance, forging crit chance increases the chance by 4.6%, which is much more than a normal point of crit chance. And forging weapon speed equates to 2 points each time, and 3 points if you do it a 3rd time. Forging a weapon will cost 10 cinder shards during the first forge, 15 during the second, and 20 for the 3rd forge. However, if you use a diamond, you'll only need to forge once, only costing 10 cinder shards, but you'll get 3 random stats. On top of all of that, you can enchant the weapons just like you do the tools. And there's 5 different enchantments. Artful, which gives you a 50% cooldown on special moves. Bug Killers doubles damage to bugs, as well as allowing you to kill the armored bugs in the Skull Cavern. It's not worth it, they don't have a great drop table. Crusader allows you to do 50% more damage to mummies, ghosts, skeletons, and void spirits, as well as knocking mummies out without needing a bomb. Vampiric gives you a 9% chance to regain some health on a kill, and the amount you heal will be about 10% of the monster's health. And Haymaker, which is the only non-combat related one, can allow you to get fiber when cutting grass alongside extra hay. Now, before I talk about any weapons specifically, it's important to know about the 3 different weapon types: swords, daggers, and clubs. Swords and clubs are somewhat similar due to swinging the same, but daggers have a stabbing motion, making it harder and more risky to land hits. Each type of weapon also has a special attack. Swords block from every direction, clubs will slam the ground, damaging all enemies around it, and daggers will lock any enemies in place and hit them 4 times quickly. So for the most part, clubs are considered to be the best weapon type, mostly because they naturally have a higher damage stat than the other weapons, but also because there's a bit of an exploit with the special attack. By default, the club special attack is bound to right click. If you left click during the special attack, it'll hit an extra time, and you can do this as much as you can fit into the special attack. This makes the damage potential almost endless. So now we'll be going over every weapon, its stats, where it can be found, and if it's special in any way. I'll be going in order of the earliest you can find a weapon to the latest. First, the beautiful rusty sword. This is given to you upon your first time entering the mines. Your goal is pretty much to replace this as soon as you can. And the wooden blade is the first weapon you can buy from the shop. I don't really recommend it, as it's outclassed by a weapon you're guaranteed to obtain on floor 20 of the mines. So, it may feel like we skipped around, but the Neptune's Glaive is available as soon as you're able to fish. It has a low chance of being in any treasure chests you get, and if you obtain it early, it'll be your best possible option for a long time. Not to mention, it's free, when a lot of weapons in the shop are very expensive. The Broken Trident is the other weapon available in treasure chests. It's still incredibly powerful, just like the Neptune's Glaive, comparable to daggers you would unlock around floor 80 of the mines. Next, we have 2 weapons that are available on floors 1 to 19 of the mines that are in the special items category. These are items that can be dropped either from crates found in the mines or by special slimes, which you'll know because they have a star on their head. These special items are usually really good compared to other weapons found at this point. So from now on, you know what I mean when I call something a special item. These first 2 special items are the carving knife, which is the weakest of all daggers, probably only better than the rusty sword, and the wooden club. While it's the weakest of all generally available clubs at this point, it's still very powerful. Clubs are usually only unlocked later in the game. This is the only club available until floor 40. It one-shots most enemies found on these early floors. The Iron Dirk becomes viable at the Adventurers Guild after reaching floor 15 in the mines. It's alright, but it's super expensive for this early in the game. The steel small sword is your first guaranteed upgrade obtained from a chest on floor 20 of the mines, unless you randomize the mine chest in the settings, that is. It's only a little stronger than the rusty sword damage-wise, but it comes with a nice +2 speed. The silver saber becomes viable after reaching floor 20. It's alright. It might be the first weapon worth buying from the shop since it comes with a defense boost, and you won't get any more guaranteed swords from the mines for a while. The forced sword is a special item drop on floors 20 to 59. This is another big win if you manage to get it early. A speed and defense buff combo is rare, plus it's slightly stronger than anything you can buy at this point. And the Windspire is a dagger that replaces the carving knife as a special item from floors 20 to 39. Daggers just still aren't that good, especially when this is still able to hit ones for damage. The Cutlass becomes viable after reaching floor 25. It's barely better than the Silver Saber, and it's twice the price. Pass. And the Pirate Sword, viable after reaching floor 30. Weaker than the Silver Saber, but 100 gold more expensive, with a speed buff. Another pass. So I'm putting this next one here because it could plausibly be unlocked depending on how much time you spend on these early floors of the mines. The Insect Head is the reward for killing 125 bugs. Honestly, it's a pretty good weapon. Bugs are one of the most common enemies, and 125 is one of the lower counts for the Slayer goals, so it might be worth grinding out for an early advantage. The Wood Mallet is viable after reaching floor 40 of the mines. It's the first club that you can grab for sure, but at 2,000 gold, it's a pretty hard sell. The Iron Edge is a special item on floors 40 to 59. It's got a weight of +3, and honestly, I think it's worse for it. You're going to encounter a lot of bats and ghosts on these floors, and it can become really annoying to kill when they're knocked back a mile each hit. The Lead Rod is a special item on floors 40 to 79, and it's probably your best bet for a club at this point, but that -4 speed is gonna hurt. As a reminder, that's like having a -12 speed for a sword. Luckily, it can 1 and 2 shot a lot of the upcoming enemies. The Claymore is viable after reaching floor 45. It's as expensive as a wooden mallet, but it's a little bit faster and does more damage. The weight still kinda hurts though. This one's a favorite. I didn't know about this weapon until I did this. The Templar's Blade, viable after reaching floor 55 for 4,000 gold. First of all, no. And to sweeten the deal, it is the only weapon in the entire game that has no chance to crit by default. The only one. We hate the Templar's Blade. Absolute dog water of a weapon. Shawnee agrees. The Crystal Dagger is your first guaranteed weapon since the Steel Small Sword. It's a chest on floor 60. I'll be honest, it's not that much better. There's like a dozen weapons we've gone over so far that are better than it, including the Broken Trident Dagger that's been available since you first got a fishing rod. Only use it if you have to. The Shadow Dagger is a special item on floors 60 to 79. Would you believe that it does over double the damage that the Crystal Dagger does? Because it does. This is actually a pretty decent drop. The Bone Sword becomes viable once you reach floor 75, but it's also a fairly common drop from skeletons at 4%, which start appearing on floor 71. It would be a pretty good weapon, but it's outclassed by a guaranteed weapon coming up soon. With floor 80 comes 4 new special weapons. The worst of which being the Burglar's Shank. It is literally weaker than the Shadow Dagger found on earlier floors. What were they thinking? The Slammer is as good as it gets when it comes to clubs for the mines, which is not saying much. Its damage is around a lot of the swords you can find around here, which isn't what you want when you're working with a slower weapon. The Yeti Tooth is the first weapon that I would say passes the Neptune's Glaive that we could get all that time ago. It comes with a fantastic +4 defense, which makes up for it being slightly weaker than the upcoming guaranteed weapon. The Tempered Broadsword, on the other hand, I mean, what's not to love? I'll tell you what, all of it. Slow, heavy, and weaker than our guaranteed weapon. Speaking of, the Obsidian Edge. It's an outright decent weapon found in a chest on floor 90. If you don't get any lucky drops or buy anything, this is as good as it gets. The Still Falchion is viable after reaching floor 90. It's slightly stronger than the Obsidian Edge, but you're gonna love that +4 speed. Unfortunately, the price isn't doing it any favors. Thing is, the Obsidian Edge works just fine for the rest of the mines, so this isn't overly necessary. It's also available as a special item on floor 100 or later, and I'd say it's the best special item drop in the entire mines. Unlike the Cudgel, which is also a special item at floor 100 or lower. Straight up, it is not as good as the Slammer that was available earlier. And that brings us to the final weapon of the mines, the Lava Katana. It's viable after reaching the bottom, and it costs a fat 25,000. I'll try to justify that price to you the best I can. First, it is outright the strongest weapon in this point in the game. You're taking on the Skull Cavern next, and it's going to be rough with anything weaker than this. It's also got that tasty +3 defense to help you take a few more hits. However, all of that does not matter if you're lucky enough to find a prismatic shard, because the Galaxy Sword is kind of the premier weapon of the whole game. Technically, you can unlock it a while ago, but that requires a few things. Number one, you unlocked the desert either by completing the Vault Bundle or paying it off on the Joja membership board. And two, you found a prismatic shard, one of the rarest items in the game. If you bring that prismatic shard to the middle of these 3 pillars in the desert, you'll be given the Galaxy Sword for free. Even though the Lava Katana was the best weapon so far, this wipes the floor with it. It's stronger and with a +4 speed boost to attack quickly. With this, you're set for the rest of the game. Not that there aren't better weapons. Upon obtaining the Galaxy Sword, you unlock 2 other weapons in the Adventurers Guild. The Galaxy Dagger, which I'm gonna be honest, meh. I'm not sure if you want to pay 35,000 gold for a weapon that's worse than what you already have. And the Galaxy Hammer. This, on the other hand, can be turned into arguably the best weapon in the entire game. It's got a hefty price tag of 75,000 gold for a reason. I'd recommend just using the Galaxy Sword until you get to a point where 75,000 gold doesn't feel like a lot. Now, moving on to our next section, we have weapons found in the Skull Cavern. First of all, the Wicked Kriss. This is a special item in all of the Skull Cavern. It's definitely there. It's arguably worse than the Obsidian Edge. Who's arguing that? Me. That's it. From here on out, we're going to be talking about weapons found in the post-game area of version 1.5. So if you don't want spoilers, skip over to the rings. Okay, the weapons from Ginger Island essentially come in sets. The first is the Dwarf set. These weapons are all about defending. They're found in common chests in the Volcano Dungeon, which are the ones without that orange stripe. For damage, they're all comparable to the Galaxy weapons, but they all come with large defense and weight stats. As far as all your Ginger Island weapons go, none of them are going to be outright bad, but this is the worst of them. Next, we have the Dragon Tooth weapons. These come from the rare chests in the Volcano Dungeon. These are nearly the most powerful weapons in the game, high damage and high crit chances. One thing to note though, crit chance and power aren't quite as good for clubs, since the special attack can't get a critical hit. But they all overpower the Galaxy weapons, so you can't go wrong. Now we do have one outlier here, the Iridium Needle. For this one, you're going to have to enter the 100 Golden Walnut door and take the challenge that changes the mines into the dangerous mines. In that situation only, the Iridium Needle is a special item dropped from the dangerous version of Special Slimes. Now it may not be the indisputable best weapon, but it is my favorite. So its damage is 20 to 35, nothing special, weaker than the Galaxy Dagger. But you might see that it has a +6 crit chance and +200 crit power. This makes it the highest crit chance at 10% and the most powerful crit at ×7 damage. Through forging, rings, and luck buffs, you can bump that crit rate up to around a 50% chance. Still not quite as strong as what's up next, but it sure is fun. Now our last set of weapons are the Infinity weapons. These are actually forged from the Galaxy weapons, so they have the same price tags as they do. 35,000 for the dagger, 75,000 for the hammer. To forge them, you'll need to obtain 3 Galaxy Souls, which have quite a few ways to obtain, all of which include the Walnut Room. First, you could get 40 key gems from various challenges to trade for 1 Battle Soul. You can trade 10 radioactive bars, the ore of which is only found in the Dangerous Mines or Dangerous Skull Cavern, and trade that for 1 from the Island Trader, only available on the last day of seasons. Or after you've defeated 50 of a certain type of dangerous enemy, which is the ones that show up in the Dangerous Mines and Dangerous Skull Cavern, they can just outright drop. After you've gathered the Battle Souls and 60 Cinder Shards, forge them onto your weapon of choice and you will now have one of the most powerful weapons in the game. Plus, they come with a little defense boost. Did you doubt that I was going to talk about all of the weapons? Well, almost all of them are useful at specific points in your journey if you're lucky enough to find them, except for the Templar's Blade. Moving on to the ring section, it'll be a bit shorter since there's not as many rings. As some quick introductory information about rings, you can hold 2 at a time, and they pretty much all have effects that relate to combat, which is why you're seeing it in this guide. So first we need to talk about the two rings upon which society was built. The small glow ring and the small magnet ring. Both can be found in fishing chests, both are a reward for community center bundles, and both can be dropped from crates in the first 40 floors of the mines. Yes, they have small effects, but they're so important. If you've had a farm for multiple years, when's the last time you had to experience 11 PM in the pure darkness? When's the last time you've cut trees or gone through the mines without extra magnetism? It's horrible. While these two rings may not be the strongest, they're reliably gotten in most playthroughs and provide very useful effects. Then we have the regular glow and regular magnet rings. These both drop as special items on floors 40 to 80 and basically have double the effect as their small counterparts. Do you want to know something crazy? Not as good as the small ones. I mean, yeah, they're literally better than them, but they're found later and can only be found with luck, and they get quickly outclassed by the upcoming glowstone ring. The glowstone ring is a crafting recipe unlocked relatively early at mining level 4. You'll usually have it by the time you reach the end of the mines. This is simply the glow ring and the magnet ring combined, and it's incredible for it. As previously discussed, there's a ring for each of your combat stats, either sold in the shop or found in fishing chests. They each raise their stat by 10%. Notable is the topaz ring, which does not increase your defense. Instead, it says it increases the weapon precision stat. The more astute among you may notice that I didn't reference such a stat. That is because it doesn't exist, and this ring does nothing. There's a couple of rings that you unlock the crafting recipe for as you level up combat. The sturdy ring, which cuts debuff times in half, the warrior ring, which gives you a very low chance to get an attack buff after slaying a monster, equal to 30 points of damage on each hit for 5 seconds. The ring of Yoba gives you a very small chance to become invincible for a few seconds after being hit. The lower your HP, the higher the chance. You're better off with just a defense buff. And finally, the iridium band, easily the best ring in the game. It combines the effect of the glowstone ring and the ruby ring, two of which individually are very good. It's a very expensive crafting recipe, but it's worth going for. Next, we have the rings you can get from Slayer tasks. From slaying 1,000 slimes, you get the Slime Charmer ring, making you invincible to slimes. This is a nice quality of life one, especially if you have a slime hutch. Next, the Burglar's ring for slaying 500 dust sprites. Basically, every enemy will now have 2 chances to drop items instead of 1, effectively doubling the items they drop. The Crab Shell ring, obtained from slaying 60 rock crabs, increases your defense by 5. The Napalm ring is obtained from slaying 250 serpents and will make an enemy explode when you kill it, destroying any nearby rocks and hurting other enemies. You will not take damage. The Vampire ring from killing 200 bats restores 2 HP every time you slay a monster. And finally, the Savage ring from 150 Void Spirits gives you a +2 speed boost for 3 seconds after slaying all monsters. Surprisingly handy, you can really feel that boost. Our last set of rings are ones that you'll need to get lucky to find, much like many of the weapons. First, the immunity band can be found as a special item on floors 100 plus of the mines, or in the Skull Cavern. It simply increases immunity by 4. The Lucky Ring, another fan favorite, can be dropped as a special item in the Skull Cavern, or more commonly, it can be found while panning. It just gives a +1 to luck, but as we've discussed, it's such a good skill that this is a highly sought after ring. Funny enough, if you're looking for it, you should look during lucky days and give yourself the best luck buff you can. Lastly, we have 4 late game rings that can only be found in the Volcano Dungeon chests. The Hot Java ring adds a 10% drop of coffee and a 7.5% drop of espresso to all enemies, in addition to what they'd normally drop. The Protection ring increases your invincibility time after taking a hit by 0.4 seconds, giving you a total of 1.6 seconds of invincibility, or 2 seconds if you're wearing 2 of them. And finally, the Soul Sapper ring is the energy version of the Vampire ring, giving 4 energy after slaying a monster. Once you reach the forge, on top of the 2 ring slots you normally have, you can combine them. It costs 20 Cinder Shards, and the only limitation is that you can't combine a ring with itself. You can, however, combine 2 different rings with similar effects, such as the Glow Ring with the Glowstone ring, or the Ruby ring with the Iridium band. And if you ever want to use them in a different combination, you can take them apart whenever at no cost. Last, I just want to talk about the last of the equipment types, boots. In all reality, these are not very impactful and not very important to pay attention to, but they do affect your combat. You get 2 guaranteed boots, one at floor 40 of the mines, combat boots giving you a +3 defense, and one on floor 80 of the mines, the Firewalker boots, which gives you +3 defense and +3 immunity. Now, basically, I wouldn't tell you to go after any kind of boots unless you're looking for a certain color, in which case, here's a chart of all the boots and where they can be found. Otherwise, what most people consider to be the best boots in the game are the Cinder Clown shoes, which give you +6 defense, +5 immunity, and they're just straight up bought from the Volcano Dungeon shop on floor 5 for 100 Cinder Shards. Also, on the topic of boots, since they do affect your appearance, if you ever want to replace the look of one boot with another, you can tailor them together. When tailoring them, you'll get the stats of whatever boots are on the bottom and the look of whatever boots are on the top. This will be permanent. If you want to change their look again, you'll have to put another pair of boots in the top. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that this can be done with weapons at the forge. It'll cost you 10 Cinder Shards, and put the weapon you want the stats of on the left and the one you want the look of on the right. You can only merge weapons of the same type, and this does not apply to slingshots. Now for the level up rewards. First, whenever you level up, you get a flat increase of 5 HP. So if you're struggling with harder monsters or deeper floors, you can't go wrong with getting an extra combat level up or two. As for crafting recipes, on level 1, you get the Sturdy Ring, which we've discussed, and Bug Steak. This is a bit of an emergency food item that can be crafted out of 10 bug meat that'll heal 45 energy and 30 HP. That's a lot of bug meat to sacrifice for just a little bit of healing. At level 2, you get the Life Elixir recipe. This is the single best healing item in the game at the cost of every mushroom other than common. It says it only heals for 90 HP, but that's not true. It heals for 100% of your HP no matter what. At level 3, you get the Roots Platter recipe, made out of only a cave carrot and a renter root, both items that can be found in the mines. While it does heal a decent amount, it's mostly known for its attack buff of 3. We haven't really discussed the attack stat, but basically what it does is 1 point of attack is 3 damage points, flat. So this +3 attack will give you +9 damage on every attack. At level 4, you get the Warrior Ring, which we previously discussed. And at level 5, we have our first profession choice between Fighter, which makes all attacks deal 10% more damage, in addition to a 15 HP increase. I mean, you can't go wrong, that's more damage. On the other side, we have Scout, which increases the critical strike chance by 50%. I want to stress that this is not additive. You do not now have a minimum 50% chance to crit. This is multiplicative with your actual crit chance. So say you have a 5% chance to crit, now you have a 7.5% chance to crit. Now, just looking at these, I feel like you can pretty easily go towards Fighter. The damage and HP will help you no matter what, whereas for Scout, it's really only useful if you're specifically using weapons with a high critical hit rate, and even then, you're not getting any HP for it. Moving on to level 6, you get the Slime Egg Press. This is an item that is just about required if you want to have a slime hutch. What it does is it takes 100 slime and turns it into an egg. This egg can randomly be one of 4 colors: green, blue, red, or purple, all in increasing rarity and increasing value. I'll always say it, the slime hutch isn't a bad idea. It's actually pretty good. And then you'll also get the Oil of Garlic. This is a crafting recipe with the steep price of 10 garlic and 1 oil that gives you a food item that can give you the Oil of Garlic buff. This buff lasts for 10 real-world minutes and will prevent any enemies from spawning in the mines. In the Skull Cavern, it prevents floors from being infested and will prevent swarms, which is when the screen gets all hazy and a bunch of flying enemies start coming at you. It also sells for 1,000 gold, which is notably a bit more than the garlic and oil would sell for in most cases, so make of that what you will. At level 7, you get 2 rings, the Ring of Yoba and the Thorns Ring. At level 8, you get the Slime Incubator, the other half required for the Slime Hutch. This is where you take those slime eggs you made previously and hatch them. Interestingly enough, these can be put anywhere. You can hatch slimes wherever you want, even in town and in your house. And you also get explosive ammo, which is so important. So I didn't discuss the slingshot too much in this. That's because I truly believe it to be more of a mining tool than a combat tool. Yes, it can deal damage with different kinds of ammo, but the explosive ammo is really where it's at. It acts like a slightly smaller cherry bomb when it impacts a wall and it explodes immediately, making it incredibly quick for Skull Cavern runs. Level 9, you finally get the beautiful Iridium Band, which we discussed previously, and and you get squid ink ravioli, another unique recipe buff. The recipe is pretty specific, needing squid ink, wheat flour, and tomato, and what the squid ink ravioli buff does is it prevents you from getting any debuffs. It's not crazy, but it can be useful in a very specific situation, namely floors 40 to 80 of the Dangerous Mines, which has the worst debuff in the game, nausea, which prevents you from eating any food. What's interesting to note is the squid ink ravioli buff does take the place of your food buff, but the oil of garlic buff doesn't, so you can have it alongside food buffs. And finally at level 10, we're getting our second profession. So first, looking on the fighter side, we have Brute, which is dealing an additional 15% more damage, which would be a total of 25% more damage, or Defender, which adds 25 more HP, coming to a total of 40 extra HP from the professions. Honestly, either or. This is completely up to you. I think these are completely balanced, one for a more offensive playstyle, one for a more defensive. Go crazy. Then we have the scout professions. First we have Acrobat, which cuts the cooldown on special moves in half. Pretty good, especially for clubs, which have a really good special move. This is a popular one. And then we have Desperado, which makes critical strikes do 2 times damage. Again, this is a case where Acrobat works with any weapon, and Desperado only works with weapons that want to do critical hits. It's crazy if you have like the Iridium Needle, but otherwise, I think you'd almost always have to go with Acrobat, or better yet, over onto Fighter for more general use. That should be it. Now you may be saying I didn't go over all of the enemies. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that. I kinda already did do it actually with my Skull Cavern and Dangerous Mines guide. So if you want to know like specific strategies against specific enemies, you can go and do that. But for the most part, the enemies in Stardew Valley, you know, they're pretty simple. They walk towards you. Sometimes they throw something at you. That's like it. Anyway, we're finally at the end of all of the skill tutorials. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and good night.